This is Blender Module 14 on Dynamics, Demo 1 on Basic Fog. So we're going to take this object and just do a Shift-D and copy it, and take that copy and drag it out. And we'll take both of these, Shift-D, and drag those out. And we'll take all of these, Shift-D one more time, and drag those all out. And now we have basically a bunch of different boxes fading off into the distance. Accidentally added that too. Okay, so let's see if we render what we got at this point. Okay, I need to adjust the camera real quick. So Control-Alt-0 on numpad. Now I render this out. Okay, we got something now. You can see the light's a little funny, so what I'm going to do is go on the top view, change this light over to a sunlight, and then rotate it so that it's pointing in that direction. And now if we render this out, we should have a better scene. Okay, so this is a basic setup. I just wanted to show you these cubes going back into space so you can kind of understand what's happening. So we have the camera, we change the light position, and all we need to do is we go to World, and we go down to the bottom, and there's an option for mist, and we literally toggle it on. And if we go and we render the image, we can see that there's a little bit of mist right here. So the mist is based on whatever the default color is of the sky. So if I take this and decide that I want to change it to a blue, let's increase the saturation a little so you can see what's happening. Now we render this image out. Now you can see that this is actually fading to blue. So this is pretty simple, pretty basic. There's a lot of things you can do to it. You can get a real-time preview with it. It's only going to show up on the geometry. It's not going to show off on anything else. So that's the one thing that if we do GLSL and we switch over to texture view, you can see that we actually can see what is happening to the mist, which is handy when you actually want to go in and set it up. Now, as far as the controls, there's a couple different things you can do. The start is how far from the camera the mist starts, and the depth is basically when it stops. So anything that's more than 30 units away will basically disappear, which is what we're seeing here. So if we decrease the start amount, you can see we're pulling in. And then if we increase the depth, or if we decrease the depth, you can see we can kind of basically play around and adjust basically what's happening. The height is if you want to do fog that's like laying over the ground. So that's all there is to set up the mist. It's pretty simple, and you can use it for basic things. Now let's go to the next demo. And this one's a little bit more complicated. This is basically going to do an explosion. So we're going to get rid of the default cube. We're going to add a UV sphere. We're going to keep the UV sphere as is, and we're going to go into Object and Quick Effect, Quick Explode. And let's see if we need to change the pieces outward. Outward velocity. Oh, well, let me just play this real quick so you can see what happens. Okay, so you can see it's kind of falling. So this is a really nice tool if you want to do things that are set up. And if we go back to 0, it puts it back together so you can see 1. Basically, it's already broken apart at 1. The numbers aren't a problem. What I'd like to do is I'd like to change the initial velocity. I'm going to increase it to 9, and what that's going to do is it's going to shoot it out. So now, if we hit play, you can see it breaks out and it shatters, and we get a lot more happening with the explosion. So that's effect number 1. Effect number 2, so this is actually geometric. Effect number 2 is actually adding the smoke to it. So once again, we're going to select the UV sphere, go to the first frame, Object, Quick Effect, Quick Smoke. And we're going to get a box. And at this point, if we go and we hit play, let's see, we get the explosion, and that's about all we have at this point. Let me change back the display to, okay, we got multi-texture. Texture, okay, let's hit play. Okay, there we go. Now we can actually see the smoke. Okay, so it's not the multi-texture, it's basically just setting the domain to texture view. And what'll happen is when you hit play, it's going to take that object and it's going to create smoke. And you can see the smoke actually gets stuck in what's called the domain, which is what's created. So if we go over and we look at the outliner, we got our default camera lamp. We had a sphere. When we applied the quick effect, we created smoke domain. And what this does is it tries to optimize what's actually being calculated, so the smoke is pretty simplistic and easy to access. So let's take the domain. We have the domain selected, and let's increase its dimensions to 10, 10, and 10. And now you can see it's a lot bigger. We can get a lot more that we can actually see in it. So at that point, that's going to help us with that. And then we also want to add another thing, which is flames. So you can see at this point we add this. Let's go to camera view. Actually, let's zoom out a little. So let's zoom a little further out and Control-Alt-0. And there we go. Now we got the new camera. And if we render that image. Now remember, these take a while with the smoke, but you can see there are the pieces and there's the explosion. And I'm also going to change the background. Right now it's gray. I'll change it to white or black so you can actually see it, but you can see the chunks actually flying through and all those types of things. So let's change the background to black. Okay, there we go. And what we're going to do is go back and select the UV sphere again. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into the Physics tab. And already added to this is the smoke. So you can manually do this, setting up the domain and the flow. The quick effect's easier. It sets up some materials and things, so it's not as confusing. So I'd recommend just using the quick one and tweaking. And what we want to do is right now, this is defaulting to smoke. We want to change this to fire and smoke. And now, if we play this, we get, you can see there's flames as well, and then we get the black and it fades out. So this is a pretty nice, it's a combination of the two. And the only thing we want to do is we want to enable the fog to actually dissolve. And this is controlled by the domain. So we're going to go back to the domain. You can see right there is dissolve. And what this is going to do is over time, the smoke is going to disappear so that the flames appear more and it looks like the smoke is fading out. So go back. Hit play again, see what we got. Okay, once we're happy with that and get everything we like, we can go. And there's a lot of other settings you can do to get it, but the thing to remember is this is really fast. So it's something that you want to be aware of. And before you go to render it or anything, I definitely recommend you make sure that you save this. And I've actually had some experience with the processor where depending on the rendering complexity, you could have some issues. So I'm going to do, let's see, module 14, demo 2. Okay, so I got that saved. And at this point, I'm going to go and change my render settings just to save some time. I'm going to knock this down to 25%. I'm not going to do the entire animation. You can see that once we get to basically, let's see, 20. Yeah, by the time we're at 40, pretty well everything is almost done. There's a couple chunks that are still around. Yeah, so by 60, everything's gone, so there's no reason to do the end frame that high. So we'll do 60. So that's set, so that's all we're going to see. We also want to make sure the domain is set that way as well. If we go in the smoke cache, we can look right now, it's calculating. The cache is basically a pre-rendering. This is the memory where everything's saved. You want to set this to 60 as well, because you want to make sure that everything is the same size. Let's go back and then I'll talk a little bit more about the cache. So we got that set up. I'm going to switch this over to 15 frames a second just to make it a little shorter, and as opposed to 24, which is film. Designate a location to save this as. I'll just do it on desktop and module 2 and accept. And let's see what else we need to do. Change this over to H264. Change coding to QuickTime. If you don't have QuickTime, just keep it as an AVI. And that's all the settings there. I like to change the light once again and make it into a sunlight. So I'm going to go switch that over. and I can rotate on the top, but basically all I want to do is I want to take the Z rotation and set it to -60, which is just angling it in a slightly different way, relationship to the camera. And that's all we need to do. So I'll save it one more time to be sure. File save, and then I will render out this animation. So do render and render animation, and I'm going to pause this and we'll come back and see what we get. Okay, so here's the rendering. Display it. I didn't do the whole thing, but partial, and you can kind of see the idea of how it's set up. The one thing I forgot to mention was that you want to select the smoke domain, and you want to open up the smoke cache, and you want to bake it. And what the bake does is it actually writes all the data to the animation, so it doesn't have to calculate a render time. So this is kind of critical. You can either just use the default location, or if you want, you can toggle on external file, and you can create a path and have it saved somewhere else, like a scratch disk. But you want to make sure that you're using this and hitting the bake, because if not, it takes extra processor power.